Good afternoon. It is 5 o'clock on the 14th of May, 2020, and this is a beer with the Old Growler. Today, this is the 39th Old Growler. We're going to celebrate tomorrow at the 40th, of course. And it's the 59th day of shelter in place here in New York City, more specifically here in Brooklyn. My name is Peter LaFrance, the Old Growler. I've been covering the beverage industry in the hospitality industry for a good 40 years almost. And so here I am as you can tell, as a journalist and covering this particular industry with a shelter in place, it's a little bit difficult. And well, the reason I'm here, if you want to know, take a look at the front page trailer, and the Old Growler and myself will explain it to you. Okay. We're going to be working, for those of you who watch this religiously, I do thank you very much. But it has been kind of an unscripted production, a semi-scripted production. We're going to explore, next week we're going to have a little change. First of all, we're going to feature Brooklyn beers, and each day there'll be a different tasting of a Brooklyn beer to start out with. But that goes to the format change. The first part of the Old Growler, get together with the Old Growler, a beer with the Old Growler, is when we have a tasting. It'll be a feature tasting. Now, each day I will post pictures on, let's see, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And that will be the picture, and it will just be there. It'll say that tasting tonight or tasting today or something along that line. But that way you'll know what beer we'll be tasting that particular day. And that will be the feature beer. And after that, then if you're here to watch the tastings, fantastic. I really do appreciate it. And if you give me a thumbs up, and especially if you ring that alert bell down there, you'll know when all of the tastings come up. But the second part is going to be a personal thing. It's called My Life as a Professional Barfly, and I'll be essentially telling the story of what it's been like to cover the beverage industry, the malt beverage industry, the beer industry. When I was at Beverage Media, I covered all of the alcohol beverage industries, wine, spirits, and beer, and then got into the covering stories for the restaurant industry for other magazines. So it'll be a look back, and I'll try, and what I'm going to try and do is pick a particular restaurant or a particular dinner and describe and explain why I was there, what I was there for, the reason to go, and what I got out of the experience, both personally and professionally, because that's one of the fun things about being a journalist, is that there's the research part, and then there's the sit down and writing part. And I'd much rather talk about the research part than the writing part. But that's essentially what the small change in format here is going to be. And since it is after 5 o'clock, it's time for a beer from the Old Growler. And that's what we've got right here. Purchased it yesterday at the Henry Street Ale House. I didn't get a chance to get over there today. But if I remember correctly, and I can always check my receipts, this is a Two Roads Road to Ruin, and I tightly did the top down rather tightly and spent it in the fridge. So we're going to see just how well this particular beer holds up after one night in the growler. Oh, there's a hiss. There's a hiss. Not an enthusiastic hiss, but a hiss. Okay. Well, there's still some carbonation in there. So I'm a happy camper. It's going to take a little while for that head to develop, but it rises and it falls. And there we go. Well, anyways, I'm glad to have folks here. Oh, there's 4 of you. So it's good to see you. From the Old Growler to you, cheers. Oh, that's refreshing. Boy, I wouldn't say it's like pasta and better the next day, but that's not a bad flavor. It holds up. And as you can see on the side of the glass, yes, it does. It still has carbonation. So, well, let's see. What are we going to do? Well, first of all, it's another gorgeous day here in Brooklyn. And I'm glad to have folks here. Thanks for the thumbs up. I do appreciate that. Yesterday, if you were here yesterday, we went north of the border to Quebec, and we picked up a Porter Baltique Hickson from the two brothers Brasserie up there in Quebec. And it was mainly it was a winter beer, designed to be a winter beer for when they got through playing hockey at the municipal rink. And it was a very tasty beer. I mean, it was a real treat. And again, I want to thank Amy Harardi for sending it to me. It was a real pleasure. Well, we're going to stay in the season. Yes. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Yes. This is a treasure, and I probably would have saved it for a Friday, but I've decided that I need a treat. And when you speak to people who collect beverages, mainly wine, and you say to them, "Oh, what wine would you which of all of your collection would you drink?" And the response is, "Well, no, they don't. They don't drink those wines. Those are for collecting." Well, as far as I'm concerned, wine and beer and spirits are meant to be drunk. They're meant to be enjoyed. To collect it, it defeats the whole purpose of the reason it was brewed. So anyways, today we're going to crack open our special ale. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from the Anchor Brewing Company. And this was bottled in 1989. So we're going to take a look at this, and we're going to. This is what we're going to try out. But first, I got to wet my whistle here. Oh, okay. These should taste it. Okay. Thoughts and musings. Did that. So, I'm excited about next week, about putting together a theme on the week. If you have any ideas of what themes you would like to see, whether you'd like to see maybe summer beers, or India Pale Ales, or at any the New England or Northeast India Pale Ale, the hazy little things. It's actually that Bruce. If you'd like to see any of that, please let me know. Or if you have a particular food topic that you would like to bring up, please do bring it up. Because, let's see, there is, I'm musing over in my mind about possibly doing these live, but then presenting them on my channel with the addition of maybe some illustrations, pictures that would explain what I'm talking about, and that is technically a little bit advanced, but that has also been going through my mind. The Old Growler doesn't just sit down and muse or ruminate about the old days. No, the Old Growler is still Yes, His Royal Highness still believes. Cheers. Oh, I'm also excited about going back and having a chance to sit for 15 or 20 minutes and recall some of the places and the dinners. In fact, that's what I'm gonna, after we get after we celebrate Christmas. For those of you who are left, you'll get to hear about beer dinners and how they're put together, and some of my favorite, at least one, maybe two, of my favorite beer dinners, and where they were and what it was all about. Later on, there'll be discussions about, well, there are a couple of wine dinners. As a journalist for beverage media, I covered wine dinners as well. And not to, I know it's probably a simplistic thing to say, but essentially a wine dinner or a beer dinner is put together to show off either the beverage or the food, and sometimes both. And that's when you have an event like that, you're very lucky. When you have people that connect up like that, you're very lucky. And I was lucky enough, I believe it was 1990. It was my first year at the Boston Dine Around. And Peter, it's time for a tasting. You promised people a tasting. Yes, I did. I promised you. In any event, the Old Growler is going to get a chance to do two of the favorite things he loves to do. Well, there's a bunch of them, but these two are right up there, is to drink beer and to share the experience with others and to try and remember the days of September when life was mellow and I was a young fellow. And take a look back at what could possibly be the golden years of restaurants, pubs, bars, and taverns in New York City. Now that, Jesus, shit, I didn't, wow. I hadn't thought about that. Here I am going to write a book that goes back to 1976 and tells the stories of the development of the New York City bar scene as seen through the eyes of a of a beer geek and a developing journalist covering that field up until what, the 16th of March of this year. That's a heavy load. Well, I'm going to bring you along with me. That's what I'm going to do. Come around 5:20, 5:30 every day. We're going to take a little trip back, take a look. Right now, let me just clear my palate with some seltzer water. And for this one, I'm gonna welcome Gary Monterosa from New Jersey and his channel. He has asked for those of us who do tastings or evaluations of beers if they're going to do one, because he's having some problems getting together enough content, and so I'm perfectly willing to invite him in on this one, because I think it's a very to me it's going to be a very exciting beer. Now, when you take a look on this channel, there is there's a playlist, and the playlist is called Tastings at the Henry Street Ale House, and I've been doing that for about a year until we went into quarantine. Maybe a year, a little bit more. But every Thursday, I get together at the Henry Street Ale House with Jerry Scott, the be bartender manager, and Jim Bennis, a good friend of mine, a professional, well, not quite a professional barfly, but a good one. And the place, the Henry Street Ale House, is in Brooklyn Heights, pretty much at the end of the walkway for the Brooklyn Bridge. And so at that time, they were getting a lot of tourists come in. And of course, Jerry's kids, there were a lot of regulars. So Not Half Bad Jimmy and Locke and some of the other kids. But the people would get together, and there'd be at least 3 or 4 of us. And it was called Meeting Expectations. And what we would do is we would take a look at the bottle or the can of beer, and sometimes a spirit would drop by, and we'd try, yes, I've got a spirit. Like, no, she's gone. Madame Petrini. When I find her again, that was a gin that was unbelievable. Came from Utah. But what we do is we take a look at the label. Well, we read all the information that they're presenting to us, and we say, well, what do we expect? And then it's, we expect this, that, and the other. Jerry cracks the can or bottle open, and then we taste it, and we see if it meets expectations. So let's take a look at this one. What have we got? I've tantalized you with the fact that it is our special ale, and it is from the Anchor Brewing Company, and it's from 1989. So it's 30-something years old, almost. Well, whatever, I can't do the math. Now, it says brewed and bottled by Anchor Brewing Company, San Francisco, California. Net contents 12 fluid ounces. Ale brewed with natural flavors. Now, if you can see on the label, it is a conifer tree, and I will put in the link what it does. It has the information on here. This is a Acer Fediloflatidanus. So I can't translate Latin, but as I say, I'll put that information below. And it's Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. California Redemption Value on the back. I don't see an alcohol content, but we're going to read what the professional beer world is just called a necker. It's not someone who sits in the movie theater. What's a movie theater? Come on, Peter. Okay, this is the 15th special ale from the brewers at Anchor. It is sold only from early December to early January. The ale's recipe is different every year, but the intent with which we offer it remains the same. Joy and celebration of the newness of life. A tree is the ancient sign for the winter. A tree is the ancient sign for the winter solstice, when the earth with its seasons appears born anew. And that's a great little sentiment there. And before I do this tasting, I'm going to tell you that in 1990, I was working for Beverage Media Magazine, and at that time, and I'm going to tell the story again because it has to do with this particular, well, not this beer, but this type, style, or the beer that was brewed after this. In 1991, boy, that must have been good. Monica just talked about a 1991 vintage, but yes. So, anyways, a year later, in 1990, I was at Beverage Media and just starting out, and the Windows on the World. Kevin Israeli was the sommelier there, and they had a fantastic wine cellar. I mean, a wine cellar that was incredible. And he decided to do, it was in the wintertime, he decided to do a beer event. And so he had some of the craft brewers in New York. We had just started to really to have some of the brew pubs and some of the small breweries. So Brooklyn Beer was represented. A friend of mine was New York Harbor Ale was there. It was a small group, but it was enough so that it is. Kevin was saying that Windows on the World's wine list. We can also have a beer list, and this was pretty amazing for that type of restaurant at the time. And I was one of the brewer that the fellow that owned Anchor Steam, Fritz Maytag, was there, of course, and there was all the brewers were there, and you could talk with them, and that was the whole point of it, a nice press conference. And boy, they served some good beers there. But I had a chance to ask Fritz Maytag a question, and it had to do with this with the beer that came a year after this, the 1990. And I said to him, "Do you think that your beer is more of a Burgundy or it was either Burgundy or Bordeaux?" And he thought for a second, and before he answered, one of the other journalists that was standing there said, "We're here to talk about beer, not wine." And Maytag gives him one of these looks, up and down, and he says to him, "We're all friends in fermentation." And I have loved that quote for so long, and I always love to give him credit for that. But yes, we're all friends in fermentation, and that had to do with this style of beer. And each year it's slightly different in what he puts in, and sometimes he will put in some evergreen. And so it's going to be interesting to crack this open. So what am I expecting? Well, a beer 31 years old. If it survives at all, it will go beyond expectations. However, he had a reputation for putting together high alcohol beers, which means this might be around 10% alcohol. Even if it is, I have both high expectations and probably a bit of dread going through me. But that's enough of my pontifications. Let's crack this open and see what it's gonna taste like. All right. That proves I am wearing trousers. Oh boy. This is exciting. To me, anyways, and for all of those of you who are watching after this date, I hope you're as excited as I am. All right, well, I don't have the ideal glass. I'm sorry, I should have a snifter of some sort, but I don't. But okay, calm down, Peter. You can do this. Okay. It doesn't want to come off. Well, there was a whisper. There was a whisper. Might have been a last gasp. Okay. I'm expecting this to be copper colored. That doesn't leave room for the aroma, Peter. I know. I was nervous. Well, I wouldn't say it wasn't pleasant. It's an unidentified aroma. There There is a whisper, of what could have been or might have been a sherry at one time. It lingers for a long time, but it's not dead yet. I think if I probably kept the bottle in maybe better condition, it might have been a little this 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 is a memory. That's what this is. Uh, it is a distinct memory that is to explain would try to go back 30 something years or more. It's a sign of mortality. Even beers die. Did it meet expectations? Well, as I said when I cracked it, before I cracked it open, the fact that it's that old, if it was still alive at all, would just be a miracle. And it's probably still breathing, but well, that's why you shouldn't save beer for that long, or wine. Spirits, on the other hand, well, depends on the bottles or barrels, whatever. Well, I wish I had opened it up earlier. And that is how I'm going to end this tasting. Is that but sometimes you, I'm not quite too sure how to handle that. Disappointing. But again, how can you expect something to last that long, Peter? Well, on the road to perdition. Oh, another thumbs up. Thank you very much. Oh, I appreciate that. All right. For those of you who are still with me, I thank you very much. And I'm now going to transition into what is going to be the topic today. Well, it's general. Oh, that's be a major disaster. And that was a pun, and I'm not going to do that again. Yes, I will. Beer dinners. I threatened earlier to talk about beer dinners, and I will talk about them now. After writing Cooking and Eating with Beer, in 1997, I think it was. Anyways, after writing Cooking and Eating with Beer, it's still available on Amazon, and you can check it out. It was 97. It had to be 97 because Beer Basics was 95, a year to write Cooking and Eating. So it was 97. 97, 98, 99, and 90. Those years were spent promoting the book as much as I could. And a lot of it had to do with beer dinners. Now, those in the culinary world, wine dinners were understood. That was where you went and in fact, you showed off your wine. If you were an individual, but of course they're individuals, Peter. Other than no, come on, you could be an organization and it's wine. Now, that's true. In fact, that calls to mind the Chaîne des Rôtissiers, and that is a wine organization of aficionados who get together. And as rôtissier, it has to do with food and putting together wine. And these people are, when I say wine aficionados, I'm talking again about people who collect wine, but they collect wine to drink. And so we're talking is whatever great vintages that are available, that will bring these out to these dinners to show off to each other. And I was lucky enough to be invited to one of these dinners. And I can't remember her name, but she was a wonderful PR person. Always wear hats when they weren't fashionable. We were talking the 90s. It's just a real dynamic person. So I got invited to the Chaîne des Rôtissiers, and it was Daniel Ballou, and he was the chef. Yes, they hire a chef like that, and he did beef cheeks. Oh, first of all, the food. That was amazing, and the wines that they poured, some of them were $400 and $500 a bottle, and it was the flavors and everybody. It was just such a well. That's a wine dinner. Okay, beer dinners are a bit more convivial, and I think one of the first major beer dinners I did outside of New York was in say 95, 97, 98. It was probably in 99. And I had a chance to get together with folks from Boston. And they had what was called the Boston Dine Around, and it was in the springtime. Well, not nice springtime. What in New England we call the slush season, or in Vermont we would call the mud season. And so we would get together. They asked me to come up. And the thing is, you had to be sponsored by a brewery and a restaurant. And so I was sponsored by Harpoon. Yes, Harpoon Brewing Company. And oh man, I've just had a brain. We just had a senior moment. Oh, the fellow who was running Harpoon at the time. Man, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. But he knew Mary Catherine Diebel, who owned Upstairs at the Pudding, which was a restaurant, a white tablecloth restaurant above the Hasty Pudding Club at Harvard, because he had gone to Harvard and he had his wedding reception at the Upstairs at the Pudding. And so there was the big connection right there. And I was lucky enough to be invited to do a dinner there. And what it was involved in the situation, if you were part of the book of the Boston Dine Around, it was a 3-day event. They said to you, you could either fly or take the train, and I took the train up to Boston North Station, and it was just a half a block, maybe 2 blocks to the La Meridienne, and that was where they had us in shelter, so to speak. Nice old hotel. I mean, it was such a thrill. A lot of fun. It was for 3 nights. Was it 2 nights? Yes, 3 days, 2 nights. But we did 2 dinners, and that was the deal. You had to do 2 dinners at the restaurant. You could have your books, you could sign them, and the whole business. But the restaurant would probably do. The object was to coordinate with you. You would put together a menu from your book, and then you would explain, and the chef would explain. And it was a nice way to get people out into restaurants at that time, and at a slow part of the season. And apparently it was very successful because it lasted for about 5 years. I was invited back once again to Upstairs at the Pudding, and then upstairs when it was Upstairs at the Square. on the square because it moved to Harvard Square, and then the German place in Boston. I'll think of it in a minute. I'm thinking Jasper White's, but that's not. Um, anyways, so that was what was involved, and it was a great experience to be able to have your book available and to have the recipes. I would say tested out in professional kitchens. In my case, a lot of the recipes I already had the professional measurements because I had talked to the chefs. Back then, you did phone interviews. But the beer dinner I remember the best was the first one at upstairs at the Pudding, and it was particularly interesting because it was the first time I saw that they were taking beer seriously at a place that had a reputation for a fantastic wine list, and back then the cocktail list. It was unbelievable. And the reputation of the place was solid, and it was a real treat to be there. What did I take away from the first that first beer dinner? To be more organized, that was the first thing, and to be less less professorial, I guess. That was it. To lighten up a little bit. But and as far as writing that came out of that, I was personally, geez, I can't remember his name from Harpoon, but the personal relationships were really, I think that was the real fun part there, and even more so was the fact that there was a potluck dinner lunch that was always held. So the 3 years that I was there anyway was held. And what it was involved was that the chefs would, from each of the restaurants, would put together a, we used to call them casseroles, dishes that could be put on a hot table. And there would be a potluck. It was essentially a potluck lunch thrown for all of the authors that had come. And we had a chance to get together and to sit and talk. And I had a chance to chat with Rick Bayless and Jasper White and oh geez, I can't remember from here in Brooklyn, Jessica Harris. It was just a marvelous time to meet and greet and to trade books, and that was a lot of fun. And I think that because we've all gone through the same ritual of researching and writing and having it published. Some more prolific than others, but it was Louis Osteen. I remember him in particular, a very jovial fellow from South Carolina. Just a wonderful event, and that was what the beer dinners to me were all about. It was the meeting the people, being with them, and being able to share what I knew about the beers. And being able to be a part of a beer and food event. It's not just an event for drinking beer, but it was a place to share, and that was the thing that I remember most about beer dinners. And there'll be some other particular dinners that I'll come up with later in this second part of Beer with the Old Growler. And I thank you for watching. And if you have not subscribed, please do so. A thumbs up is always appreciated. And if you want to keep track of me, make sure that you hit the alert bell. I want to thank everybody for being here. And let's see, is it? Oh, yes, sir. We've pretty much visited. I look forward to tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'm not quite too sure what beer we have. You're going to have to watch the social media to see what kind, or you're going to be surprised. Anyways, thank you all for being here. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and for those of you who are watching me at a later date, Cheers, and I hope all of your beers meet expectations.